So my name is Holly Reynolds, Senior Product Designer here at GitLab for the Plan team and the Project Management Group. Actually, I'm going to share my screen. I don't have slides today. Make sure that I can get to this. Yes, there we go. I don't have slides today. Just wanted to share an activity that I had worked on recently that I found to be really useful. So I was inspired recently by Nadia Sotnikova's 3-year vision for Verify, and realized that I also kind of struggled to understand what we were working on for larger scale initiatives and themes within Plan, kind of a long-term vision. So I talked with my manager and my PM and decided it would be useful to do a vision mapping session, but for just a year. Anything longer than that felt a little too nebulous and a little too hard to kind of really properly define and plan for. A couple of other groups have done similar activities to this, so I reviewed some of the mural boards on the topic that existed and created my own variation from one that I believe Nick Post had created. So if that was the case, thank you so much Nick, if some of this looks kind of familiar. And then scheduled a synchronous call with my PM Gabe. We initially discussed how we should think about project management within GitLab. So I'm going to pause here and go to the issue. There is an issue for it. I did it a little bit backwards in that we started on the discussion and on the mural before creating the issue. And then I went back and created the issue. If you do want to go back and watch any of the sessions that we did for this, they are all listed here in the issue. They are all private because we mentioned customers here and there. So you'll need to be logged into the respective account on YouTube to see it, but you can also get to the mural board here if you want to see some of that. And of course, please let me know if you have any feedback or thoughts on it if you do go to visit it. So this is the map at a high level. I'm going to just kind of zoom in on a couple of specific pieces. This is the question we started out with, which was, how should we think about project management within GitLab? This was a bit of a stakeholder interview to help me better understand his vision and perspective on our group. We, of course, have little conversations all the time that are similar to this, but we don't usually go quite into this level of depth and have this level of intentionality with our conversation. So it was really valuable. We realized that there's a unique opportunity for our group in that our PM is a user and is also an example of a persona of our user for our specific group, which I think he navigates really well. So he's a PM whose target user is PMs for a product where we focus on product management. So there's a bit of opportunity there for us both, because I also feel that there's a little more overlap here at GitLab regarding product design and product management than I have experienced at other companies, which I think is a very, very good thing. So I feel at times I'm also impacted or potential persona impacted by some of our product management use cases. And having this discussion was really helpful for us to kind of talk through and identify some of our own biases, align on core pain points. One in particular that we continue to hear over and over in Plan is that our users feel that GitLab is geared more toward a highly technical audience rather than maybe less tech savvy users. So that's something in product management in particular that we're always aware of and striving to improve on. So I also copied over, let me scroll over here. He had created a page in our handbook where he had started to kind of outline the 2021 high level initiatives for Plan. So I copied those over and then we just talked through each. We outlined known pain points that we were looking to address, documented unknowns about the initiatives, as well as questions about feasibility and technical constraints. Next, we began examining existing epics and issues related to these higher initiatives and plotting them on a timeline. So that included talking about what we're doing now, what we're going to do in about 3 to 6 months, where we want to go eventually, which would be end of the year or longer. I also added in, of course, some of my own interests, such as UX OKRs and design refinements work. There was no real reason for the 3 to 6 month timeline. That was just kind of a time that felt like enough time for us to have the ability to think kind of longer term without losing sight. Did I freeze? Still good. Okay, I got the message that my internet froze for a moment. So no particular reason for that particular timeline. Just again, it felt like long enough for us to think a little bit bigger without losing sight of what we could be doing now to work toward those goals. And then, of course, we had the sort of longer vision, which is where we maybe want to go eventually. We were striving for end of the year and not really beyond that, but that was an option if we needed to do that. Next, we had a feasibility feedback section, and this was just where we outlined questions for engineering and others. And then we had a parking lot section for just tabled questions and thoughts. Lastly, I went through all of the SUS feedback. I read every single piece of user feedback regarding plan and documented the key ones on stickies, which we reviewed together. This was extremely helpful in providing some validation surrounding the proposed vision and timelines, as well as helped us both to kind of surface some additional concerns and questions. So again, you can see all of this here. Of course, we went through and grouped those items and have them all listed here just as reference as we went through this process. So this conversation was about an hour, but it went so well that we decided to have another meeting and include others from plan, such as Kristen and the dev managers. That went so well that we had a third and final conversation, synchronously at least. In each of these, we moved items around, we removed questions that we had or would have that would have become rather blockers and aligned on larger visions. And that's what I would say the primary benefit of this was for me. It was just to get everyone in alignment on the vision, get those questions answered that helped us to better plan and prioritize our work, as well as to identify dependencies between work. So there were things that I didn't realize, certain pieces of this larger vision that were dependent on one another. And those were questions that it was just really helpful to have the engineers there to just quickly say, well, we really can't do this until we can complete that, but we could move this. And, so we were able to have those conversations, which do happen asynchronously as well. But it was done very quickly, to be honest, in this sync session. And, we were all, again, in the same vision map, so we could see everything at once and kind of have that larger visual in front of us that kind of plotted everything out in one place, rather than trying to kind of think through all of the different pieces of the puzzle and how everything needed to fit together to complete the overarching vision for the year. So for next steps, we are looking to locate and document all of the relevant epics and issues for each hire initiative into a single issue, which will be this one here likely, just so we have understanding as to what's associated with what, and then go back and revisit the list in a few months to kind of examine how things have changed, if they've changed, and maybe talk through why. But I did receive great feedback from some of the other people that attended the session that it was extremely helpful for them as well. So I think that, again, the final benefit for everyone was just alignment on vision and understanding of priority and why we might need to do something after something else, just getting clarity on those kinds of things. That's really all that I had for this particular session. So I don't know, are we taking questions now, or are we doing questions async?
Yeah, we do have 4 presentations. I think you only took 10 minutes, so we theoretically have 5 minutes for questions. I'd encourage folks to put them in the agenda so that we can do it fairly and inclusively. There's a couple read-only, Holly. You can respond to them or not, whenever you want to. And then Austin has a question. Do you want to read your question, Austin?
Yeah, sure. So my question for you, Holly, is with these like visionary issues, one thing I've struggled with is like keeping them lightweight so they don't become this heavy artifact that has to be like manually updated all the time. Do you have any strategies that have worked well for you, or you think you'll be doing? You mentioned like going back and revisiting it every couple of months. I found this a challenge. I come back 3 months later and I'm like, oh, all this is stale and now it's all out of date and has to be totally rewritten. What are your thoughts?
So I think that's a great question, and to be honest, I'm still kind of doing this for the first time, this particular type of activity, and kind of leading it for the first time. So I haven't really encountered that type of challenge yet, but it makes perfect sense that it would be something that would be a challenge to sort of maintain over time. My thought is that it may not be necessarily something that we want to really actively maintain over time, but it could just give us kind of a baseline for the year to think about where we were, get everybody in alignment on what we're striving to do now. I think I would want to understand the benefit of going back in a few months and revisiting it. I have a theory that it's valuable, but we haven't done that yet. So it could be that we get back to it, and to your point, everything is different and we realize we need to just do something else altogether. So in that case, it might not be valuable to maintain it. It might be valuable to look at doing something different. But I do like the thought, at least, and I'm hoping that if we were to go back in a few months, not that much would have changed, that we would still have a bit of a baseline in place and that we could just evaluate any, adjustments that may have occurred. But I don't know. It could be that everything's wildly different and the whole thing is kind of purposeless at that point. If you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. We can talk async as well about that.
Yeah, totally. No, thank you for the transparency. I think you had a great response.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to answer the other questions, just async in the doc, so we can move on for time's sake, Mike, if you'd like.
I will stop the recording. I want to check in though. Does anyone have a question? We still have a few minutes. Okay.